Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. First of all, thank you, Sandos, for recommending this subject. This is a very interesting subject, and I don't think I myself know enough about the subject. So, what I try to do, at least, try to do a little bit of research about the subject, although this is not comprehensive enough, but at least it would give you like an idea about the subject. Today's subject is going to be about the psychology of children that are raised in like constant parental fighting. Sometimes, your parents fight all the time. They're arguing about stuff, what to do, maybe plans. Maybe they have a lot of disagreements. And in that environment, you have children, right? So to what extent these kids are influenced by that constant fighting? Of course, before we mention that fighting, there is a root to that problem, which is fighting. And then the root of it is that people before getting married, they had certain expectations of their partner. And then once they got married, maybe those expectations faded. There were certain promises that were not fulfilled. Maybe you've seen a person, maybe the person changed the way they behave with you. Maybe before marriage they were a certain way, but after they got married, they completely changed, and that sometimes could create constant fighting all the time because you did not wish that life to be that way. And sometimes before, if you don't have kids, I think it's kind of easier for you to just leave if you're constantly fighting. So you just leave that marriage and you are gonna be at peace. But I think once kids are on the table, it becomes very difficult for you to leave because you're going to have kids and you think about, their future. They're going to be raised without a father or a mother. It gets really difficult to have to deal with them, right? It's like you're stuck with your kids. And again, you pity that they have to grow up without their parent. So something to get out of the way. Again, it's just something that people did not expect. And we have, I think in our culture, in society, we have less and less education on how to be a good parent, how to be a good father, how to be a good mother, what is expected of you to be a good parent. And I feel like it is true in our society, in Moroccan society, that there is this pressure on you. Once you get a certain age, people are going to say, it's time you get married. And it's okay. Don't worry about money. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Everything is going to be fine. Just carry on and, we'll support you in any way. But yeah, it's like a lot of societal pressure that push you to make a decision, a life long decision that is definitely going to change the way you do things onward. And it is not easy. Marriage is a huge step. So before getting married, before being involved with somebody, you need to understand, to be contented with what you want to do in the future. Do you want to get married? Do you want to have kids? Are you ready for that financially, psychologically? There are a lot of reasons or a lot of standards you have to meet to be able to be a good parent. You shouldn't do something because your parents, your environments, your siblings, people around you forced you or influenced you to do, although it's really difficult not to. But I feel like you have to understand, you have to be aware of all the nuances around the marriage. In English, when we say you have to be aware of all the nuances, we mean like the differences, the emotional, psychological, cultural detail about marriage, right? Nuances are all of these details, again, differences, and around also feelings too, or expressions around a certain subject. So I think most of us can agree that if you are exposed to frequent and resolved, sometimes destructive parental conflict, you are going to be at a higher risk for emotional problems like anxiety, depression, And sometimes behavioral problems, like being too aggressive towards others. Sometimes if you're a teacher or just a parent, and you might observe that there are certain kids that are more aggressive than usual. And if you were to trace that root of a problem, you always have to go back to the way their parents behave. If their parents are completely normal, there isn't like such constant conflict at home, your kids are going to absorb that calm, that peace, that understanding that you have at home, and then naturally become like that, become like a peaceful, benign person. When we say benign in English, we mean kind. You are kind towards others, benign. So also these kids that grew up in these kind of environments, they have difficulties interacting like socially with their peers. They might have like trust problems, like they cannot, they're very competitive, although sometimes that's good, but like very, again, we talked about aggressiveness. They're very aggressive. When we say somebody is aggressive, meaning they have a tendency to be violent, to attack others, either verbally or physically, to be aggressive, although it's somehow related to personality as well. Being aggressive has also a link to personality as well, but there is some of it that is environmental as well, that kids can absorb from their parents or the environment they're raised in. So what does research say about this? So the first one has to do with emotional and internalizing problems. This theory argues that problems turn inward, meaning the child's distress is directed at themselves rather than at others. Example, if the child is anxious, the kids might constantly worry. They'll have this repeated question in their head. Will my parents fight again? Is it the time for them to fight? When will they fight? They'll always ask these questions. Is it because of me? Am I the person that is causing them to fight again? Am I responsible in some way? And sometimes they question their own existence. If I am the odd one out, meaning there has to be some way for me to alleviate them with their burden. And sometimes in a lot of families, you have kids running away from their parents, especially parents that are constantly fighting. This is more common in Western cultures where they have their individualistic cultures. It is less common in collective cultures because, again, there is a strong bond between the family. So if you leave the parents, you can always go to your aunt or other relatives. But I think in Western cultures, if you leave home, you will leave forever. A child at home may also feel sad and hopeless, or maybe like on this numbness because the home, the environment feels so unpredictable or unsafe for them, and naturally they would feel again this depression, aching or eating away at them from the inside. The other thing that happens to a child is that they become easily startled, meaning they avoid conflicts or fear, like loud noises. If something can easily irritate them or like make them afraid. In English, when we say startled, we mean by this quick reaction to an environment. A voice, it could be, I don't know, an appearance of somebody. Basically, it's like a sudden surprise or a sudden fear that you get, very, very sudden, when something in the environment showed up or, pops up out of nowhere, you get startled. The last thing that children might get from this environment is low self-esteem. So these children, many of them, they internalize this message that they are the cause of the fights. They are the ones responsible for these fights. And if they were not there, maybe their parents would not fight anymore. So they get this feeling of unworthy or not good enough. In English, when we say unworthy, we mean like not deserving. You're not deserving of something good, right? I'm unworthy of you. So this constant conflict, it threatens the child's sense of emotional security as well. They feel unsafe and again powerless, and their stress hormones stay active for too long, actually. And that could lead to emotional withdrawal and negative self thought. In English, when we say emotional withdrawal, we mean shutting down emotionally, right? This person is gonna pull back. So this person will stop showing emotions or feelings. They stop talking about what's wrong, and sometimes they avoid even emotional closeness with others. So we talked about internalizing problems, but also there is externalizing problems. To internalize is to the effect is inward, meaning inside of you. Now there is the effect that is outward, outside of you, right? So we talked about aggression because it's the most prominent one, right? For example, like yelling at people, hitting people, being a bully as well, is a way of like, copying the anger that they see at home or they experience in the environment. It is also conducting problems like breaking rules or lying all the time, and also skipping school all the time. If you miss school all the time, there is a sign that you have problems at home. The other thing that happens is delinquency. Delinquency is anything that is bad or illegal done by somebody that is young. It could be like vandalism or stealing. Skipping school is also considered a form of delinquency. When kids are young, they might not be too aggressive or they might not do much. They may start with like stealing, maybe fighting. But I think the older they get in adolescence, they become more extreme. They might grow into like vandalism, maybe our minor criminal behavior. It could escalate, right? The older you get, the more it escalates. The last thing that our kids externalize is this risk taking. So it starts with substance use. So again, these kids are going to start using drugs or use any chemical substance that change how your body and mind works. And of course, reckless driving. If they get into, they start with these motorcycles and they get into a lot of accidents, and that's a sign of like risk taking. And why does this happen to begin with? There is a famous social theorist called Bandura. He came up with this social learning theory. He said that children learn through modeling. When they see shouting or hostility as the way adults handle problems, they imitate those patterns and they too become hostile towards others. We have to understand that conflict at home affects how your brain focuses, learns, and also processes information. Kids that live in constant parental fighting homes, in places where there is constant fighting, they are going to have poor concentration. This child's mind is always distracted by what's going on at home. Are my parents fighting? Will they fight again? Again, constant worrying, right? They also have memory problems. They have this chronic stress, which always affects the hippocampus. This is a part of your brain which is responsible for memory. It's a region in your brain called the hippocampus and responsible for memory. So if stress is affecting that part of your brain, meaning you are not going to be focused, you are not going to be memorizing, learning anything from school. Basically, school is just a waste of time. Maybe it could be for you like a way to relax, but if there is also problems or there is stress at school, then that's like there is also this decline in grades. Kids that grew up in these kind of homes, homework for them becomes really hard to do. They might daydream all the time and disengage from like reality, sometimes dissociate from reality. And naturally, you are going to decline in grades. You cannot move on. You cannot progress unless you're memorizing or understanding the content of the curriculum. The last thing that happens is this executive function issues, meaning their ability to manage things, right? So kids will have trouble planning things or being organized or finishing tasks. You start tasks and you might not be able to finish them. All of this happens because of the brain's stress response system. It is also called the HPA axis. So it stays on like high alert all the time. Instead of focusing on learning, the child's mind is like scanning for danger, for threats, for anything that is bad. So it would not be focused on learning. Your brain is going to interpret the smallest shout or scare for a fight. Are they fighting again? When will they fight again? What was that? So you are again in this constant state of alert and always thinking about fighting. And over time, this stress is going to divert or remove this energy from cognitive development. Basically, your cognition is going to deteriorate and you will not learn a lot over the years. Kids that are raised in that environment also experience peer and relationship problems. So basically, they are going to be rejected. Naturally, if you are seen as moody, defensive, and quick to anger, people are not going to be or want to be around you. These kids also have difficulty in sharing with others or helping, and maybe also showing empathy. They will empathize less because they've learned that relationships are safe. So naturally, they will empathize less and less. And once they are adults, they might expect conflict in romantic relationships. They cannot stay in our relationships if there is no conflict in it. Sometimes they overreact to criticism and become oftentimes maybe avoidant or distant from their partner. And the last thing that happens is that they have or develop trust issues. They may fear emotional closeness or believe love always comes with pain because they've seen their parents fight, although they were in love with each other. They've seen them fight constantly. And then they would project that into a relationship. So they might have difficulty falling in love with others and again, trusting somebody to be their partner. Of course, not everybody that goes through this kind of environment experience the same thing. Some of us are more resilient than others. So naturally, although we experience the same thing, but you rationalize it, you think through it, and you find maybe support. There is somebody that you talk to, or maybe even parents when they fight together, maybe later on they come to you and then they say, we only fought because of this, because of that. So they sort of like rationalize the situation to you, and it might not be as threatening to you as if they don't actually explain anything and they'll leave you in the dark. So yes, not all of us are built different. So some of us are fragile and tend to absorb so much from the environment, but others aren't. Some others are resilient, are tough, and they have this mental fortitude to be able to block things that are scary, that are threatening to you, and you will end up like growing up as a normal child. You might even actually excel at school instead of failing school. You might excel. You might become yourself a good parent. You see that your parents were a certain way, and you understand, all right, what my parents were doing to each other was bad. And when you become a parent, you do not do any of that. You might become a good parent. You do not really fight. You find reason to doing things, and you probably become slightly softer than your parents, right? So yeah, again, not all of us are the same, and some people again experience this differently. So what are the solutions? As I said before, even after a fight, parents can minimize that harm to their children. They can have what we call a constructive fight. They fight calmly, they avoid insult. So it's going to be like a fight, but a peaceful one, or maybe like use sarcasm Sometimes it diffuses the fight, and your kids might not interpret the fight as a serious one, although you are serious, but your kids might not see it as a serious fight, or like you're joking, and once you start to see that your kid is being affected, just start to use joke like, oh, we're just joking. We didn't mean by it. We're just joking. We do this all the time. And then your kid may not, again, be influenced. It also helps if parents are apologetic to each other. If they see resolution to the fight, again, kids might interpret the problem differently. The other thing that parents should avoid is this triangulation. Never involve children in adult disputes. If you're fighting, never ask your kid to take sides. Most of the time when parents are fighting, they try to get their kid to side with them, right? That is not healthy. Never do that. Never force them to take sides, because it will affect them tremendously. The other thing parents should do is emotional reassurances. You should always tell your children that this conflict is not their fault. Remember what we said before, children are going to feel that they are the cause of that conflict. But if you give them reassurance, if you come to them and tell them, look, this is not your fault, they are going to feel safe, and they might actually not think too much or give credence to the fight, and maybe minimize the emotional damage they are going to get. The other thing, if you are parents and constantly fighting, the solution might be seeking therapy. Therapy may be scary, but it will help you find ways to reduce these destructive patterns. I think that's something a lot of parents do not do. So once you start to see signs of misunderstandings, constantly fighting with your partner, just seek support. Now, what about solutions for children? First thing is, a lot of people tend to overlook is this emotional literacy. Teach them to name emotions. I feel scared. I feel sad, and express them safely. It is just simply knowing what you feel, why you feel it, and how do you express that particular feeling healthily. The other thing is stress management techniques, like breathing exercises. Have them do these breathing exercises, mindfulness, and physical activity that regulates stress. Be part of clubs like our football clubs or drawing clubs. Have them, again, be able to regulate and manage their stress healthily. Now, what about schools? Because schools are the most important part of a child's life, because a child spends most of their time at school than at home. So it is important for a teacher to be able to spot and identify children that have anxiety, maybe attention difficulties, or behavior problems. If again, schools are able to spot that, you might use a different approach with those, because they might not, since they will have problems or difficulties understanding, they might need like a different approach to teaching them. So teachers should be supportive. They should not be neglecting what the child feels. A child that is emotional, violent, lazy, doesn't really care about studying at school, there is a root behind that. There is no way this child wants to be that way without prior environment. And they are not to blame. There are factors that influence this child to be that way. So you need to be supportive. You need to understand the root of the problem and then tackle it differently. Get closer to this child. Give them extra activities if they're falling behind. Just give them activities and care they need to bypass what they have to deal with at school and at home as well. Contact their parents and try to tell them how their conflict is affecting the child's ability to learn. Tell them what's going on at home. Children need to be safe. So you have to be I know this is like a tough ask for teachers. You cannot be talking to their parents and telling them that you're fighting and you're causing your child to fall grades. It's very difficult to do that. But again, you have to find like a middle ground. Students aren't just numbers, right? Like you don't really care whether they succeed or move on to the next grade. Everybody is just as important. Again, very difficult to do if you have a class of 40 students. But if you have less students in the class, I think it should be manageable. And that's why people say teachers should be paid more, because look, they have to do the job of a counselor, a psychologist. They have to be able to spot and identify children with certain problems, and they have to change their approach to work with these kind of students. So we cannot use just one approach with every student in class. The other things schools should do is counseling and mentoring. Once teachers identify these children that have problems in learning, they can send them to counseling. It's not like a dark room you go to where you're going to be scared. It should be like a safe room where children feel really, really safe to be at. All right, everybody. Hopefully you liked the podcast. I try to do my best to be as educational and comprehensive as possible. All of these topics about psychology need to be talked about with like a psychologist. They know best, they know a lot. So I try to at least read and find the research that is helpful and related to what we're talking about. Hopefully you liked the podcast. Until then, bye.